Wide open Tobias Harris, and Tobias drills it! Sixers up one!
Embiid fakes, Embiid down the
What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the Pick Swap Media YouTube channel. My name is Barnard, as always, and here we are going to take a look at Kyle Filipowski, take a deep dive into his game, his stats, what we know about how his game could translate to the NBA level, as well as dive into some highlights to see specifically what I'm referencing here. So I want to start off with a little intro here with Kyle Filipowski, that he is a guy who spent 2 years at Duke, seemed to be a one-and-done target, that he was a high recruit, and that seemed to be the expectation. Kind of dipped his toes in the NBA waters last year, and now ultimately returned for a season, and now is fully committed to the NBA draft. While he didn't take probably the leaps and bounds forward that I think a lot of people expected and hoped in year two at Duke, I do think he showed some signs of improving on some of the necessary skill sets that will be needed at the NBA level. That while he didn't become this new dynamic number one option, nothing more than we already kind of knew from year one, that he did improve on some areas around the margins that I do think will be necessary. So let's jump into a little bit of his stats here and then begin by looking at some film. And we'll start off with, as you can see, 2 years at Duke. He is real deal 7 feet tall. He does have a negative wingspan, which I think is interesting to note. That is very uncommon, particularly with big men, but he officially measured in the combine at let me get the exact numbers right here. 6'10" and 3/4 of an inch tall with a 8'11" standing range, but his wingspan 6'10" and half an inch. So 1/4 of an inch shorter, not a big deal there, but it is a little bit limiting when thinking about that. The longer the wingspan, the better chances of growing into a plus shot blocker. And I don't think that those chances for Kyle Filipowski are particularly high, although he did improve his block numbers from 0.7 as a freshman to 1.5 this year. That is some good signs. Also 1.3 steals as a freshman, 1.1 in his sophomore season. Excellent stuff there. As far as his stats overall for this year, they averaged 16.4 points per game, also 8.3 rebounds. We did see the rebounding numbers decrease slightly from 9.0 as a freshman. That is a bit surprising to me, as they seem to have more talent down low in his freshman year. Guys like Derek Lively, although his minutes were fairly limited during his time at Duke, he's been far better at the NBA than he was in college, which is not fully unexpected there. But the bottom line is that Filipowski still got the job done for the most part. His assist numbers increased from 1.6 to 2.8 this season. That is something that is intriguing, and I'm going to get into a little bit more. A couple other points of concern I just wanted to bring up. His free throw numbers did decrease pretty significantly this year. It sat under 70% for just about the duration of the season. Started pretty cold and then was never able to fully heat up from that area of the court there. So, but despite going 76.5% at the charity stripe as a freshman, just 67.1% this year, although he did improve his three-point numbers up to 34.8% from 28.2% as a freshman. That is a big deal. That is something that is very noteworthy. He's going to have to be a stretch kind of pick and pop type big man is the role that is projected from him. So those three-point numbers are very important. Also shot 50.5% from the field overall. Now let me take a little pull-up of some of these highlights and talk through things a little bit more from a skill set standpoint. So let me get this rolling here. So as you can see, the first thing that I do want to note about Filipowski is from a role standpoint that I do think that he is going to be a pick and pop type big. But I think that ultimately the player comp that I have, this probably isn't as high of a ceiling as people would hope, but I see a lot of Kelly Olynyk in his game. That's kind of stylistically the way I think things are translating. I do think there's a world where he ends up a better player than Kelly Olynyk. But I think what's interesting, I'll start with some of the weaknesses here. He's not a very physical basketball player. I do think he's going to get bullied pretty heavily by certain matchups. That athletically, he does not pop. He's much more nimble than he is athletic. His footwork impresses me, particularly sliding with somebody on the perimeter. And that's a nice little moment with the block there. That's something that we did not see just about at all in year one. That year two, he did show that leap. But this is good instincts, way to come across, good read, and sends that back. That's a nice play right there. Not going to be quite as easy as the NBA level as it will be when you're playing Bucknell, but still good to see those types of flashes nonetheless. As far as kind of the conversations with his athleticism, that I do think that his footwork is intriguing to me. And why I bring that up so early in this is that I think that probably the best outcome for Filipowski is that he is playing more of that power forward, maybe even a huge small forward if the shooting is good enough, that I don't see much of an upside for him being that 5-out basketball player, being a big man to the truest extent, where you can use him as still a shooter, but a guy that does the big man duties. The rebounding numbers are good. They look fine. I do think he does a nice job boxing out, being aware and being in the right spot. But I do think he possesses a little bit of that big man rebounding skill. That's something that I've talked about quite heavily with, for example, the Sixers, that Joel Embiid is a guy who gets a lot of rebounds, but not because he's a skilled rebounder. He just happens to be that big. I do think Filipowski has a little bit of skill, and you can see stuff like that spin move there. That footwork is really where he shines, that his ability to move at his size is really impressive. And that does speak to why I am optimistic that he can do some of these things, potentially playing as a true forward, a guy that shares the floor with another big man and can still move on the perimeter. I'll also say, like, the scoring, it's interesting. It feels much higher than the numbers are. Like, even throughout college as a whole, that in the 2 seasons, he shot just 31.4% combined from beyond the three-point arc. Of course, 34.8% this season compared to 28.2% as a freshman. The shot looks legit to me. It certainly passes the eye test. I like the way that his shooting form is. There's nothing mechanical that I think needs to be really cleaned up. That I do think this is a guy that will ultimately turn out as a shooter. And another intriguing aspect of his game, I think there's a lot of people higher on him in this regard than I am, but there is the potential for him to grow into a little bit more of a playmaker, where he can be a bit of generating offense. And I want to pull back this little pass here. This is a nice read for him to find a cutter. So you can see they dump down to Filipowski in the post and then finds a little cutter inside from a guy coming to double off him. So particularly nice to be aware of this double team lurking, sees him, and finds the open man underneath. That was a missed rotation from our guy tying his shoe over here, but good on Filipowski to punish it and succeed for his team. You're also seeing a little bit of this, particularly is really intriguing as a role man. He's going to need to be capable of do this. And when I bring up the playmaking ability, this is the type of play where I think he does have potential to make reads off the short roll. That to freeze this here, you can absolutely spurt this out to the corner and get a nice corner three look here. That's a level that I want to see Filipowski start to expand his game into. Ultimately, still finishes up top and gets the finish here. Little pretty tough shot there. But obviously 2 points is 2 points, so not going to be too critical for not making that pass. But that is an area where I would like to see him grow. I do think a guy that's excellent at this is Bruce Brown, and obviously much different body types between Kyle Filipowski and Bruce Brown. But that's a guy that when you put him in the pick and roll, a lot of times you can begin to create these 4-on-3 type situations. As obviously the two defenders come up, the guy guarding the ball handler and the guy guarding the screener, depending on the coverage that they're going to throw to you. A lot of times you can create the advantage where you hit the guy on a short roll and then they can either attack downhill or have a decision make with the mathematical advantage based on the numbers there. That's something that Filipowski, I would like to see his game grow into. I wouldn't quite say he's there yet, although he certainly has better playmaking than a lot of big men in this draft and just in general. Beyond that, like, I guess the biggest concern is kind of what I've been circling around is positionally, what is he? That I don't think he ultimately ends up like an NBA level center. And here's another, this is probably one of the more advanced passes that I've seen from him through the double here. I like this pass a lot. So as you can see, they dump it down to Filipowski. They bring the double just about right away. Brings the ball up over his head, is able to make this cross-court path for an open three. That's a difficult pass. It's a high-level pass from Filipowski. He is intelligent about not forcing his way into doubles. That he absolutely was one of the guys at the forefront of the scouting report for Duke on an every night basis. Him and Jared McCain were certainly the engines of the offense this year. A couple other guys, Proctor making an impact, and Jeremy Roach. They have other guys as well, but I do think that like his ability to not force things, I would take as a compliment. That even with him producing 16 points per game, it didn't feel like it was ever rushed or him searching to get to his number. He plays within the flow of the team, which I do think is a huge compliment. And is not always the case for guys that are obviously hunting their NBA opportunity and having the pedigree that Kyle Filipowski does have. So I do like Kyle Filipowski. He's a guy that I have talked myself into potentially being a move for the Sixers with that 16th pick. Certainly not top of my list. I mentioned it, I feel like, every video, but Devin Carter absolutely at the top of the list from the Sixers perspective there. But I do think that regardless of where Filipowski ends up, he will be a guy that at the minimum will be just a playable rotation player. I think the maximum, probably the ceiling for him, is very situational. That I think if you pair him with the right front court partner, you can find a way to make this guy a starting caliber player. I do think the talent level is that high, but there are some concerns for how his game will adjust. In contrast to a guy like Isaiah Collier, who I recently broke down, he's a guy that I think I fully believe will be better at the NBA level than he was in college. I don't quite feel as confident about that when it comes to Kyle Filipowski. That it did feel like he maximized his talents to an extent in a way where a guy like Collier certainly did not, based on the situation there. And here is another look at Filipowski. When I talk about being able to attack closeouts and utilize things, look at the way that he gets downhill. This is a pretty athletic finish here, pretty tough finish. Look at the way he kind of hovers in the air. And for starters, look at how it's created, that he creates this shot for himself. The ball is swung, beats the guy, pump fake, beat him off the dribble, and tough finish there. That's a really good look. There's a lot of these moments where, honestly, the more I would say that throughout the college basketball season, I was a little bit underwhelmed with Filipowski, that I felt like he didn't take the necessary leap that I personally was hoping, that I wanted this guy to be in the conversation for one of the top picks in the draft. And he certainly did not play his way into this. And before I dive further into this point, this is the exact play that I was talking about on the short roll here. You can see he sets the screen, rolls, they hit the man, and then this is the type of 4-on-3 I'm talking about. Obviously not quite as Jared McCain's lurking up here, but you see the cutter come baseline. Filipowski already searching before he even touches the ground, gets the pass, creates an easy 2-point. That is beautiful basketball. That is stuff that you should be looking for a player like Kyle Filipowski, and a little bit of a difference maker, why he can be more than kind of one of these rim running big men. I love this play right here. That to me is a very appealing highlight, appealing clip there, and something of why he could be a little more than, just a Kelly Olynyk, that there is more of a basketball feel to his game that I really appreciate and like in his game. And you can still see that he can get up there, slam it down. He's, as much as like I've been criticized his athleticism, it's tough to put a label on it, but I do think nimble is a nice way to put it for the way that he moves. His footwork, I'm impressed by. There might be a little bit of a mentality issue that it does feel like he gets bullied a lot, and that's only going to continue at the NBA level. He's never going to be a guy winning with strength. I would like to see him bulk up a little bit more at the minimum, but that is something that I think internally he has to switch a gear where he is just more physically commanding, that he's not letting people get to the spot as easily as it occurred at times this year, but that sometimes that comes with age as well. So I'm not going to fully pin him to the fire for that. So overall, with Kyle Filipowski, I am a fan of his game. I do believe he's going to be a guy that translates to the NBA level. I think at the minimum that he's going to be a rotation level player. And I think situationally there is a world where he can lock down a starting role and help a team at a high level. So let me know what you guys think. I will keep the Kelly Olynyk player comp as my number one for Kyle Filipowski, but I do think he's going to be capable of growing into a player a little bit better than what we see from Olynyk at the NBA level. But I do want to hear from you guys in the comments. So make sure you are dropping a like on this video, drop in your comments and let me know your thoughts, your player comps, or anything else on your mind, and subscribe. Excuse me, and subscribing to Big Spot Media to keep the channel growing. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in. I'll talk with you next time right here on Big Spot Media. Peace.